Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the ResourceWorks Society. His website, resourceworks.com. You can find him on Twitter at SJ Muir. Welcome back to the show, Stewart.
Thank you, Jim.
The International Energy Association or Agency came out with a report a week or two ago that said all oil and gas exploration should stop immediately, except for any oil or gas coming from the Middle East. But apparently this report wasn't even welcomed with open arms from that area of the world.
Well, that's right. This week we have Saudi Arabia, which would benefit from the scenarios laid out in this so-called energy blueprint. Even they're comparing it to La La Land. They're saying this will be a sequel to the romantic comedy movie about some characters who break out into song and dance numbers at the drop of a hanky. And they're saying, quote, "Why should I take it seriously?" End quote. That's the Saudi energy minister when he was asked about the report. So, I think what the IEA says they're saying is that, look, we're just translating the different policy aspirations from different governments around the world to show what it would look like if you did all the things that different policy recommenders are recommending. And what it shakes down to is, as the Saudis do suggest, an unrealistic situation, which I think is probably, to be fair to the IEA, maybe what they're trying to tell us, which is that, everyone's talking a big game, but there's actually, between the laws of physics and the realities of politics, the chances of these policies actually turning into what does happen are right now, based on what we know, rather remote. And I mean, this has provoked a response from the climate activist Greta Thunberg. She was on Twitter immediately to say, we're clearly witnessing the beginning of the end of the fossil fuel era. They're starting to panic. Let's speed up the process. I don't even know what that means. It didn't sound like Saudi Arabia's panicking. They're just saying, this scenario doesn't look very realistic to us. So where does that leave us now? I mean, there's definitely overwhelming evidence that action is needed, but are the things being proposed actually the things that are going to make a difference is how I would come at this.
Well, again, this war on natural gas, I don't understand. One of the reasons why Vancouver doesn't have smog anymore in the summertime, stiffer motor vehicle emission standards, and the use of natural gas instead of wood for fireplaces and so on. Back in the 80s, I remember it was so smoggy sometimes you couldn't see across the street. And now how many smog alerts do we get a year? Only from forest fires. It's not from either industrial or motoring or home activity. So I don't understand this huge push to get rid of natural gas.
Yeah, well, I've got some news for you, Jim. The gurus at Parliament Hill, they're solving that. They're going to replace the Centennial flame that burns there and has since 1966 with carbon credits and carbon neutral biogas. They're purchasing for it. So they're making this change. It'll save 38 tons of carbon emissions a year, which is, I'm not sure what that compares to exactly, but they are going to get the biomethane they burn from Montreal landfills. And, this flame will continue to burn. So I guess that's a good thing rather than it, say, being switched off because someone decides they don't want to burn it anymore. But we do have a lot of natural gas in Canada.
Yeah, well, that's the home of the temporary $5 million hockey rink. And I went, so they could have built some community a permanent recreation center with a hockey rink, curling rink, and a swimming pool for that. But instead, and it was too cold to use it. How ironic.
Yeah.
Plus, they have the world's biggest skating rink right behind them, Rideau Canal.
Yes. Yes, that's right. But you really do hit on a interesting topic, because natural gas it's a very efficient way. You apply technology to using it more efficiently to make it as close to 100% efficiency as you can. I mean, you're already able to buy furnaces and fixtures that are well into the 90s, high 90s in terms of efficiency. So that's what you want to see. But at the same time, you've got these municipalities that are on the warpath against any sort of natural gas. There's one community I was looking at recently. If you elect to use baseboard heating or electric heating in some form rather than natural gas, you can build a much bigger house. Basically, that's what the permits will allow you. So in effect, that's a significant punishment for using natural gas, and you can see the choice being made. But
look at the heating bill. Your natural gas heating bill would be $80 a month. Your electric heating bill is going to be $800.
So you're going to have much higher cost there, and given that there's much higher demand across the board in future coming for electricity, electric cars and just the general shift towards electrification, that if you don't have increased supply, and right now it's very hard. You look at Site C, look how hard it is to build just one big hydro dam. I mean, it's not going to be easy to build all the other capacity we need in future. Apart from the sort of fantastical promises being made, we don't actually have much concrete to say you can do it economically in the realities that we have in British Columbia. So it does raise a question, as you say, of what is the price going to be. And I would also add, well, what are the benefits as well? When you've got hyper efficient gas fixtures that in future will be capturing the carbon emissions and they're not even emitting anything, why are we prohibiting that? It doesn't make a lot of sense.
Now, photoelectric windows now have become more efficient, like 20% or something. But on a cloudy day, look, I have a very nice little solar garden, I call it, on my balcony with tiki lights or solar powered little butterflies and stuff. It's quite a lighthouses. But if it's a rainy, cloudy day, that thing lasts for about an hour or two, and then everything's dim. So how practical is solar in BC?
Yeah, in BC, it's horses for courses. It's for a place like here, we're really strong on the hydro because of the vertical drop that we have as water falls in elevation. We just, gravity gets our electricity. It's worked very well. It's disruptive and getting more and more difficult to build.
Seymour Narrows is the place to put our tidal power. You got it's sometimes a 25 knot course of seawater jumping through the place where one of the world's largest non-nuclear explosions took place to take out the island, because the whirlpool that was created by Seymour Narrows was strong enough to suck down a small ship.
Well, your equipment for the tidal generation would have to be pretty skookum to survive those tides. So, whoever
we're Canadian, we build tough.
That we do, and there's a lot of energy there. So capture a little bit of that. This week at the Indigenous Partnership Success Showcase that our group ResourceWorks hosted, we had a presentation from a First Nation from the northeastern corner of BC, the Fort Nelson First Nation. They're building a significant sized geothermal facility. They've got some former gas wells that turn out to have all this hot water at the bottom of them, and they're going to harvest the energy from that using the latest geothermal technology. That we had the clean energy people from the federal government and the provincial government of BC talking with First Nations Chief Charlene Gale about this project. It was one of the more exciting parts of our program. Everyone was interested in this. So there's all these new areas, but you can't forget the fact that most of our electricity does come from hydro, from big hydro in BC. You look at Alberta, Saskatchewan, a very heavy reliance on natural gas and coal there, and it's such a large reliance that it's just not going to change quickly over time. And we also have to be concerned with efficiency and capturing carbon at the source where it's produced.
Geothermal, the Cascade Mountains, and the coastal mountains, they have either a volcano that's active or extinct about every 25 miles / 40 kilometers. Obviously, if something poked up out of the earth and is a former volcano, perhaps even an active one like Mount Baker just across the border, there's a lot of heat down there that could be used.
Well, yeah, getting at it would be technically challenging, but it's definitely there.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after this.
Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlin, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration with the drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Stewart Muir. Stewart, electric vehicles, are they going to happen sooner than people think they'll become a dominant factor on the roads?
Well, some things could be slow to get started. Electric cars are case in point, but when they really get going, they rip along. That seems to be what's happening now. I mean, it seems like every week there's some news. I know everyone's up to speed to some extent on electric cars, but we're seeing evidence that it's actually going to happen even quicker. Jaguar is going to be selling only electric cars by 2025. I mean, think about that. That's a brand that's known for these beautiful purring V8s that are just incredible engines. They're lightweight, they're efficient. That's pretty good. But no, they're going to move right over all the way to electric cars, really quickly. Volvo by 2030, Lotus only electric by 2028. I mean, it's just happening like almost on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. GM recently said they were going to go all electric by 2035. Ford all electric in Europe anyways by 2030. So, it's coming along. And there's interesting thought here that I've been seeing talked about, the so-called S-curve. The idea here is that innovations start slowly. They start with the real nerds, the early adopters. And a few years ago, that person driving a Tesla around town, that's your nerd, the only one in the neighborhood. And then you've got this kind of S-shaped curve where there's a slope of growth as prices fall. This is a typical thing for all kinds of technologies. And then you get to the point where you hit saturation, and that's, we're far from that, but we're headed in that direction. So, it's, a time of great change.
Now, what's Canada's position here? I know there's a Canadian company, the Arrow, that plans to be electric, but isn't the biggest thing for Canada the mining of the metals that will be needed for these electric cars? 300 pounds of copper in your typical electric car.
Well, that's right. I mean, every Canadian could be driving an electric car. It wouldn't really make a difference in, global anything. But if Canada became a bigger contributor for the whole world to be able to have electric cars, then it could really make a difference. And that's what it's happening because of mining, which in Vancouver and Toronto and lots of other communities, it's a huge part of the economy. It's funny, I see opinion polls all the time. Just about every time when the Canadian public is asked, what do you think are the big industries of the future, people list all these industries, and mining's always at the bottom. People think mining is going away. They think it's declining. It's actually the exact opposite. Not only is that just the trend, but it has to be the exact opposite because we need the products of mining. We need it for batteries, for electric motors, clean technology of any kind, like solar panels, wind turbines, you name it. We're the only Western country that has all the pieces when it comes to supplying batteries in future, like the cobalt, the graphite, the lithium, the nickel. We've got them all, and they're all needed.
And Canada is also the biggest repository of rare earths on the planet. And finally, I know there's an office in Saskatoon, a couple in Quebec, where they plan to start looking for and producing this stuff.
Yeah, rare earths are huge. Right now, China dominates that. We have so much potential, and we've not, it's very expensive. Rare earths, it's not a simple market to get into, and China's got some special qualities that allow it to be so dominant. But I think increasingly with the geopolitical direction and tensions with China, everyone's looking for an off-ramp to being reliant on China for anything. And Canada is a solution when it comes to rare earths. So, this is an area. When you also think about, the commitment that is needed for Indigenous economic reconciliation, it turns out as well that mining is the industry, well, I'd say forestry too, and to a great extent, energy. But it's certainly one of the energies that has the greatest potential for Indigenous Canadians to fully, meaningfully participate in the economy and benefit from it to the degree that they must. And, we were also talking about this subject at our recent Indigenous Partnerships Conference, and there's so much leadership going on there. So, it's a win-win if we can get that right. And, there's some impediments. I mean, as usual, being Canada, we have a habit of adding regulation to regulation to regulation, and pretty soon nothing's moving. You've got, increasingly, congested permitting processes that are simply leading investors to go somewhere else. They don't really accomplish anything, except the goals of the pressure groups that would prefer to see no mining at all, which, doesn't make any sense. What we do need is for those who are part of the coalition of the willing, who want to get things done and not just shut things down, to make sure that we're doing things the right ways, in terms of the environment and society and how we govern, the way we live. And that takes an effort. If people are just involved in mining speculation or investing or mining development, I think they need to do more. They need to get involved in, making sure that the world sees that we're truly the place where ESG, principles and values are authentically, implemented into all the things we do. And if we can do that, then I think the sky's the limit to how we can become a supplier of mineral products, but also the knowledge, because, Canadians, out of probably any mining strong economy in the world, we also contribute, the human power to go around the world and provide the best practices for extraction of minerals and metals, around the world.
What's the future of forestry? We have protests on Vancouver Island. Again, they're logging old growth forests. We've seen pictures of the logging trucks hauling out giant trees that took 1,000 years to grow. That's building up pressure again against forestries at time. Look, they say another 2-year government study into this. Hasn't this matter been studied enough? Just follow the recommendations from previous reports should probably do well.
Well, I think this week when we saw the Premier come out, what we're seeing is a recognition that the forest industry in BC, which is an enormous chunk of the economy. I mean, if you look at natural resources, that's 50%. There's a recent study from the province of British Columbia by economists showing that 50% of our economy in 2019 anyways, and I'm sure it's true this year still, is from the natural resource sector, and forestry is a big part of it. So, before we throw the baby out with the bathwater, I think it's very important to consider, the dependencies. There's 100,000 people who are employed in forestry. There's forest professionals, engineers, biologists, hydrologists, technicians, all kinds of different analysts. That's even before you get into what we think of as being the forest sector, which is the loggers and the truckers and, the sawmills.
And the people who sell all those plaid shirts and jackets.
Those two down at the Mark's Work Warehouse, yeah, and the local sand store. But it just goes through. We don't even see the heavy duty shop mechanics, the dealerships. They sell the fleet vehicles. The tourism sector in BC. People love to talk about growth of the tourism sector, but you know what? Tourism includes hotels and restaurants. And guess who's filling the hotels right now in BC? It's not tourists. It's workers building pipelines and Site C and the LNG plant up in Kitimat. They're in hotels, a lot of them. And that's showing up as tourism. So, when we wax rhapsodic about tourism, let's not forget that a lot of that is actually business travel for the resource sector. And, we're also seeing all those businesses paying taxes for community. So, I mean, that alone is not good enough. To be able to say, hey, it's great for the economy isn't enough. You need to be able to say, okay, is it being done right? Well, the Petcheedat First Nation, which is in South Vancouver Island, and their territory has been invaded by protesters who refuse to listen to the First Nations whose territory they're in, that has told them to get lost because they're not wanted. That First Nation is heavily involved in the forest industry, and they believe that they're doing it right, and all of this thing, Fairy Creek, brouhaha, is over a tiny 20-hectare parcel at the top of the Fairy Creek watershed. I've looked at the maps of that. It's all protected, except for this tiny part at one edge of it, up on a ridge. I mean, you have the environmentalists, they'll come out, they'll put on the violin music, and they'll talk about the mighty trees from the creek bottoms that are 1,000 years old or 2,000 years old that are being pillaged and taken away. In fact, what the Teal Jones Company is doing right now, they're preparing to follow a permitted plan to harvest at high elevations. It's not that stuff that's in the Greenpeace fundraising stuff that is dropped on people's doors. It's totally different. And I think that's why the First Nations are so upset about how their rights are being trammeled by these international protest organizations. They've come into the territory. They're disrespecting the workers. They're cutting the brake lines of ambulances. They're tampering with logging equipment. They're lighting fires out there. They're putting lives in jeopardy in order to make a point that isn't even a point worth making. I mean, that's the tragedy of this. So, someone's going to get hurt from this just doing their jobs because someone from, some city somewhere has decided.
Yeah, they go from being they go from being ecologists to eco-terrorists. The same as the Squamish Five, the ones who blew up hydro lines back in the 70s and 80s.
Well, that's right.
And then they went on to kill people by blowing up an aerospace plant in Toronto. What?
Yeah. It is like that. And, so I think, we have to see some respect, some peacefulness. I think the Premier has put out a plan. It's actually not pleasing everybody. I mean, there were a lot of people saying, yeah, this is great. But I think they're also saying more privately, we're not 100% sure this is going to be great. We think it'll preserve jobs. We think it'll preserve industry and make sure that the science of forestry is applied. But you know what? This could wind up not being so great. So even though the environmentalists are out there trashing the Premier and calling him this thing, that, and the other thing, there's some reservations on the other side too. So like most of life, it's never as simple as it looks. And I would say that when you have that on both sides, it usually means that you're doing something right. And I think Premier Horgan is doing something right in how he's proceeding through this.
Yeah, 50 Shades of Grey was optimistic. I'd say there's more like 900 Shades of Grey.
That's right.
Stewart, where can people go if they want to get more information about the topics we've talked about today?
Well, come on over to the website, resourceworks.com. Under the news and reports, we've got our recent forestry report looking at BC's place in the world in forestry, which is actually a pretty good story. And we've got all of our news updates, which we do several times through the week. That's all at resourceworks.com.
Now, in Canada, they're making moves and saying the government's not doing enough to green up the earth and so on. How does Canada rank in the G7 when it comes to respecting the climate and trying to make sure we're not doing anything bad to it?
Well, we just see a report on the G7 that's come out. It's not what you might expect, because usually a question like that, it's, bad old Canada with their terrible oil sands. That's kind of what we're used to from the highbrows of Europe on climate issues. But in fact, the G7 membership, in that group, and some other countries as well, including South Africa and India thrown into the mix. You asked the question, through the pandemic, who is the best at preserving the climate and the environment? Well, the best, it happens to be Canada in terms of the commitments and the action on net zero. So if you think that Canada's a laggard. You know, we hear all this propaganda all the time about Canada being, you know, guilty of this or that. Actually, this new study, I've been reading about it in the Financial Times today, and it's I don't know if it's out there in wider circulation yet, but I'm just looking at the chart there, and there it is. I mean, Canada far and away is the international leader in this regard. So I think we can feel pretty good about that today.
Stewart, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thank you, Jim.
My guest has been Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the ResourceWorks Society. His website, resourceworks.com. You can find him on Twitter at SJ Muir. If you have any questions for Stewart or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@howstreet.com. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter at HowStreet. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.